Now let's get into supply and demand factors in the product market. So when we're talking about the product market, really we're talking about the things that we go to the store and buy. So real quick, let's talk about the difference between something that's organic, like an organic apple, versus just like the regular apple right next to it. All right. For example, organic Fuji apples are costing 2.75 a pound, and the regular conventional ones cost $1.72. So what are the forces that are keeping the prices different, right? Could it be a demand factor, right? Maybe you like the organic better, maybe it tastes better, maybe you don't want the pesticides, right? So you're willing to pay a higher price for it. Another thing could be a supply factor, right? It costs extra money in order to get the organic certification. So from a supply standpoint, that's also why it would cost more. So supply and demand factors are why we have differences in prices. Whether someone substitutes a name brand for a store brand, or they want to pay $1,000 for a John Lennon drawing, there are these supply and demand factors that are affecting price and quantity. We can even talk about gasoline prices, right? Why would the price of gas go from $3.16 in June down to $2.42 in January? You know, you could talk about, well, it's summer, people are driving more, so there's a demand factor. You could talk about maybe there's a supply factor in the winter time. Maybe they have a very good yield in terms of oil, and that lowers down the price of gas, right? It really depends on what the buyers are willing to pay and what the sellers are willing to accept. So let's get into that. From the demand side, so that's the consumers demanding the amount of a good or service they're willing to pay and able to purchase at each price. This is based off of your needs, wants, and ability to pay. Price, what we're talking about here is the what you're buying for a unit of a specific good. And then we're going to talk about quantity demanded, which is the total number of units of a good or service that consumers are willing to pay at a given price. It is very important to note that demand is not the same as quantity demanded. Think about it like demand is just how much you really like something. So if you really like peanut butter, right, you have a demand for it. Well, now price will tell you how much you can buy. That's where the quantity demanded comes in. So quantity demanded tells you how much you can buy based off of the price. So you have your likeness of peanut butter. So basically, if the price was really high, maybe you only buy one. If the price is really low, maybe you buy two or three, depending on who you are, right? But demand is just the entire amount that you are willing to pay for something. And then quantity is the actual amount that you buy. That's the difference there. Okay. Now the law of demand is pretty straightforward. If prices are higher, then you buy less, and if prices were lower, you buy more. That's basically what we're talking about with the law of demand. It keeps all other variables constant, so nothing else changes. The only thing we're looking at is price. So based off of a higher price, you have a lower quantity demand. Very important here, price does not change your demand, right? Just because something is more expensive, that doesn't change how much you like it. It just tells you how much you can buy. All right, and because prices are higher, you have to buy less, but it does not change your demand for it. All right, demand we're going to look at in terms of a schedule real quick. A demand schedule is just a table that shows a range of prices for a certain good or service, and then the quantity at each of those prices. So this is showing us the difference between demand and quantity demanded. So your demand is saying like, hey, if the price for this, I'm going to buy this. If the price for this, buy that, right? This entire thing, like all of the quantities demanded, that is your total demand, right? Now, based off of the single price, that's your quantity demanded. There's the difference. Everybody has their own demand schedule depending on how much they purchase at each price. So based off of how much money you have or how much you really need something, that's going to change how much you're going to buy. So the market demand is going to be looking at the total amount that is being purchased by everybody in the market. All we're going to do is look at the consumers we have. So in this example, Abby, Brian, and Chris. And what we're going to look at is, hey, if the price for $3.50, what is the market demand, right? So what is the market Abby, Brian, and Chris buying at $3.50? And again, all we're going to do is just add the quantities at each price. So at $3.50, Abby's going to buy 27, Brian's going to buy 34, Chris buys 0. And so what we'll end up with is a total of 61. All right? If the price were $3.25, what happens? We see that Abby buys 2 more, Brian buys 4 more, Chris now buys 7. So again, because the prices were lower, the quantity demanded was higher. We bought more. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll have 29, 38, and 7. So that should be 74. All right. If the price were $3, Abby's at 31, 42, and 14. Again, for the market demand, all you do is you add those together. Okay. And so we'll just go ahead and complete out this table here at each price. So that's 87. This one is 100. And this one is 113. Okay. So this is the difference between an individual's demand and the market demand. Again, market is you just add them all together. What we can do now is we could put them on a demand curve. A demand curve is just a graphic representation of what we're doing. Now, it's very important to note that we're putting price on the vertical axis to show us, hey, how much is the price? And we're using quantity demanded on the horizontal axis. So price per gallon is going to be on the vertical axis. Quantity demanded, we're going to use gallons of gas there, okay, on the horizontal. So here we have Chris, right? And as you can see here, Chris is buying 0, right, at 350. So we can see that on his demand curve at 325, he's buying 7. Again, we're seeing the same information that we saw on the demand schedule here on the curve. And again, for the market demand, all we're doing here is we're just adding all of these together. So we see 61, 74, 87, 100, and 113 as we saw earlier. So this is your demand curve. This is what we're really going to be looking at moving forward. We're really going to be using the demand curve to illustrate what's going on with prices and quantity. Okay, but I really wanted to show you the difference between quantity demanded and demanded. Again, quantity demanded is this individual amount. So 7, 14, 21, and 28. Those individuals are the quantities that are being demanded at those prices. Your demand is your total amount that you like something. All right, so it shows you your entire demand curve there. Next, we'll get into what supply looks like.